I can still feel the ripples from that day 30 years ago, when I discovered that the most powerful force in martial arts isn't found in the speed of your strike or the precision of your technique. It's found in something far more subtle, far more dangerous, and infinitely more transformative. It lives in the space between your thoughts, in the moment before you move, in the stillness that exists at the center of every storm. I'm talking about the still lake of your mind. And once you learn to access it, everything changes. Everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to that moment when everything I thought I knew about fighting, about living, about being human was shattered by a single realization. It was during my early days in Hong Kong, long before Hollywood, long before anyone knew my name. I was training with my Sifu, practicing the same forms I had repeated thousands of times. My body was perfect, my technique flawless, but something was wrong. Despite all my skill, despite all my speed, I felt like I was fighting underwater, struggling against some invisible current that seemed to slow every movement, cloud every decision. That's when my teacher stopped me mid-form and asked a question that would haunt me for years. "Bruce, when you look into still water, what do you see?" I answered immediately. Me? Confidently, the way young people do when they think they know everything. My reflection, Sifu, he shook his head slowly, disappointment flickering across his weathered face. "No," he said quietly, "you see everything. The sky, the clouds, the birds passing overhead, the world above and below. But when the water is disturbed, when it's choppy and turbulent, what then?" I thought for a moment. "You see nothing clearly." "Exactly," he whispered. "Your mind is like that lake, Bruce. Right now, it's full of waves. You know that feeling, don't you? That constant chatter in your head. The endless stream of thoughts, worries, plans, regrets that never stops flowing. Hey, you wake up, and immediately your mind begins its daily assault. What do I need to do today? Did I handle that situation correctly yesterday? What if I fail? What if I fail? What if they don't like me? What if I'm not good enough?" It's like living with a radio that never turns off, static and noise drowning out any chance of real clarity, real peace, real power. But here's what most people don't understand about that mental turbulence. It's not just annoying. It's not just annoying. It's not just distracting. It's literally stealing your life force. Every wave of anxiety, every ripple of doubt, every storm of overthinking is energy that could be channeled into action, into creation, into the pure expression of who you really are. Instead, it's being wasted on internal conflict, on fighting battles that exist only in your imagination. I spent months after that conversation with my teacher trying to understand what he meant. I would sit by the harbor in Hong Kong, watching the water, studying how it moved, how it responded to wind and weather. Some days the surface was like glass, perfectly still, reflecting the world with such clarity it was impossible to tell where reality ended and reflection began. Other days it was choppy, disturbed, showing only broken fragments of the sky above. And slowly, very slowly, I began to see the connection. My mind had been like that disturbed water for as long as I could remember. Every challenge I faced, every opponent I fought, every decision I needed to make was filtered through this constant mental turbulence. I wasn't seeing situations clearly because I couldn't see them at all. I was seeing only my fears, my expectations, my preconceptions reflected back at me in fractured pieces. No wonder I felt like I was fighting underwater. I was drowning in own thoughts, drowning in my own thoughts. The breakthrough came during a sparring session that I'll never forget. I was facing a much larger opponent, someone with more experience, more strength, more reach. The validator disturbs your mental stillness by making you dependent on external validation for internal peace. When someone criticizes you, your lake becomes stormy. When someone praises you, it becomes excited and choppy. The validator has convinced you that your inner state should be determined by outer circumstances, that your peace should be dependent on other people's opinions, that your worth should be measured by external achievement. Here's what I learned through years of training. These three disturbers are not your enemies. They're just habits of mind that have outlived their usefulness. The anticipator developed to keep you safe from future threats. The analyzer developed to help you understand your environment. The validator developed to help you maintain social connections. But in our modern world, they've become like security guards who never clock out, working overtime to protect you from dangers that don't exist, creating problems they're trying to solve. The path to the still lake begins with recognition. You must become aware of these disturbers when they arise, not to fight them, not to suppress them, but simply to see them clearly. Remember, a still lake isn't still because it fights against the wind. It's still because the wind isn't blowing. It's still because the wind isn't blowing. Your mind becomes still not through force, but through understanding. I developed a practice during my training that I called lake watching. Every morning, before any physical training, before any technique practice, I would sit quietly and observe my mind like I was watching the surface of a lake. When thoughts arose, I wouldn't push them away or grab onto them. I would simply notice them, the way you might notice a bird landing on the water's surface, creating ripples, then flying away, allowing the water to return to stillness naturally. What I discovered through this practice was revolutionary. The thoughts themselves weren't the problem. The problem was my relationship to the thoughts. When I tried to stop thinking, my mind became more turbulent. When I tried to control my thoughts, they became more chaotic. But when I simply observed them without judgment, without resistance, without attachment, they naturally began to settle. Like sediment in water, they drifted to the bottom, leaving the surface clear and still. This is the first principle of achieving the still lake: observation without interference. Your thoughts are like weather patterns passing through the sky of your consciousness. You don't try to stop the clouds or control the wind. You simply watch them come and go, knowing that behind every storm, every disturbance, every commotion, the clear sky of your awareness remains unchanged. But observation alone isn't enough. You must also learn the art of non-resistance. This was perhaps the hardest lesson for me to learn, because my entire martial arts training had been about resistance, about meeting force with force, about standing strong against whatever came at me. But the mind doesn't work like the body. Mental force creates mental tension. Mental resistance creates mental conflict. The way to deal with disturbing thoughts isn't to fight them, but to allow them to pass through you like water flowing through an open channel. I remember a particularly difficult period in my early career when I was facing criticism from traditional martial artists who said I was betraying ancient ways. combined with rejection from Hollywood studios who said I was too different, too foreign, too unconventional. My mind was like a lake in a hurricane, constantly churning with anger, frustration, doubt, and defensive arguments. Every day brought new waves of disturbance, new storms of emotion. I stopped trying to fight the criticism, stopped trying to prove my worth, stopped trying to control how others saw me. Instead, I allowed all of it, the praise and the criticism, the acceptance and the rejection, the success and the failure, to simply pass through my awareness without disturbing my essential stillness. Not because I didn't care, but because I understood that my inner state was not dependent on outer circumstances. This brings me to the second principle of the still lake, emotional flow. Just as a lake allows water to flow in and out without losing its essential nature, your mind must learn to allow emotions to flow through without becoming identified with them. Anger arises and passes. Fear appears and dissolves. Joy comes and goes. But you, the awareness in which all these emotions appear, remain constant, remain still, remain still. Remain unshaken. The mistake most people make is thinking that achieving mental stillness, becoming emotionless, becoming cold, becoming detached from life. This is completely wrong. The still lake reflects everything perfectly, feels everything fully, responds to everything appropriately, but it's not disturbed by what it reflects. It doesn't hold on to the image of the birds after they've flown away. It doesn't try to recreate yesterday's sunset. It simply remains present, open, responsive to whatever appears in this moment. I learned this lesson most powerfully during the filming of Enter the Dragon. There was enormous pressure, enormous expectations, enormous opportunity. Every day brought new challenges, new conflicts, new decisions that could make or break not just the film, but my entire career. I could feel the old patterns trying to reassert themselves, the anticipator spinning stories about failure, the analyzer creating endless complications, the validator seeking constant reassurance. But I had learned to return to the lake. Between takes, during breaks, in quiet moments, I would close my eyes and reconnect with that inner stillness. Not to escape from the pressure, but to respond to it from a place of clarity rather than reactivity. The result was some of the most natural, most powerful, most authentic performance of my career. Not because I was trying to be perfect, but because I was allowing my true nature to express itself without interference from mental turbulence. This is the third principle of the still lake, authentic response. When your mind is still, when your inner lake is calm, your responses to life situations become natural, spontaneous, and perfectly appropriate. You don't have to calculate the right thing to do or say. You don't have to analyze all the possible outcomes. You don't have to seek validation for your choices. You simply respond from your deepest wisdom, your clearest perception, your most authentic self. But let me share with you the most profound discovery of all. The still lake isn't just a metaphor for peace of mind. It's a doorway to a completely different way of experiencing reality. When your mind becomes truly still, when the mental chatter finally quiets, when the waves of thought and emotion settle into perfect calm, something extraordinary happens. You begin to perceive life not as a series of problems to be solved, but as a flow to be joined. You begin to sense the deeper patterns, the hidden connections, the underlying intelligence that orchestrates all of existence. In martial arts, we call this state no mind or mushin. It's the place where technique transcends itself, where training becomes art, where the practitioner and the practice merge into one seamless expression. But this state isn't limited to martial arts. Whoa, it's available in every moment, in every activity, in every relationship, in every challenge you face. I want to share with you a specific practice that took me years to develop, something I've never taught publicly before. I call it the reflection practice, and it's based on the fundamental principle that a still lake perfectly reflects whatever appears on its surface without being changed by what it reflects. Each morning, sit quietly for just 10 minutes. Close your eyes and imagine your mind as a perfectly still lake. Now, instead of trying to stop thoughts from arising, simply observe them as reflections on the water's surface. A worry appears. Notice it as clearly as you would notice a cloud reflected in water. Then allow it to pass without stirring the lake. An emotion arises. See it as clearly as you would see a bird's reflection. Then let it fly away without disturbing your stillness. The key is to maintain the perspective of the lake itself, not to identify with the reflections. You are not the worry, you are the stillness in which the worry appears. You are not the anger, you are the clarity in which anger is witnessed. You are not the fear, you are the peace in which fear dissolves. As you practice this, you'll begin to notice something remarkable. The reflections become less and less able to disturb your essential stillness. Challenges still arise, but they don't create the same turbulence. Emotions still flow, but they don't overwhelm your clarity. Thoughts still appear, but they don't steal your presence. This practice must extend beyond formal meditation into every moment of your day. When someone criticizes you, can you remain like the still lake, reflecting their words clearly without being disturbed by them? When you face a difficult decision, can you access that inner stillness where the right choice becomes obvious? When you feel overwhelmed by life's demands, can you remember that you are not the waves of stress and pressure, but the calm depths beneath them? Let me tell you about one of the most challenging tests of this principle in my own life. During the height of my fame, I received news that would have completely destabilized my mental lake in earlier years. A close friend had betrayed a confidence, a business deal had fallen through, and harsh critics were questioning everything I had worked to build. In the old days, this combination would have created a perfect storm in my mind, waves of anger, currents of revenge, whirlpools of self-doubt. But I had learned to be the lake. I felt the news land on the surface of my awareness like stones thrown into water. I watched the ripples spread, felt their impact, acknowledged their reality. But I didn't become the ripples. I remained the lake itself, vast, deep, essentially undisturbed. From that place of stillness, I could see clearly what needed to be done. Respond appropriately to each situation. Take right action without being driven by emotional reactivity. This is the practical power of the still lake. It's not about becoming passive or indifferent. It's about becoming responsive rather than reactive, clear rather than confused, centered rather than scattered. When your mind is still, you have access to resources, insights, and capabilities that are completely hidden when your mental waters are turbulent. But I want to address something that many people struggle with when they first begin practicing this principle. They confuse stillness with emptiness, calm with numbness, peace with disconnection. This is not what I'm describing. The still lake is vibrantly alive, acutely sensitive, deeply connected to everything around it. It's not still because it's dead. It's still because it's so full of life that it doesn't need to create artificial motion. Think of a master musician playing a complex piece. Their mind isn't empty. It's completely present. Their awareness isn't numb. It's incredibly sensitive to every nuance of sound, rhythm, and feeling, But there's no mental chatter, no self-doubt, no internal commentary disturbing their performance. They have become like a still lake reflecting the music perfectly, allowing it to flow through them without obstruction. This is what becomes possible when you learn to embody the still lake in your daily life. Your work becomes more effective because you're not wasting energy on mental turbulence. Your relationships become more authentic because you're responding from clarity rather than reactivity. Your decisions become more wise because you're accessing deeper levels of intelligence than the surface mind can provide. I discovered this most powerfully in my teaching. When my mind was still, I could sense exactly what each student needed, could see their potential clearly, could respond to their questions before they even asked them. Not through some mystical power, but through the natural intelligence that emerges when mental static is eliminated. The still lake doesn't just reflect the surface of things, it reveals the depths. Now, let me share with you what I consider the ultimate practice of the still lake, something that will test everything you think you know about yourself and your capabilities. For the next 30 days, I want you to live as if your mind truly is a still lake. Not just during meditation, not just during quiet moments, but in every situation, every interaction, every challenge. When conflict arises, instead of immediately reacting, pause and ask yourself, how would a still lake respond to this disturbance? When you feel overwhelmed, instead of fighting the feeling, ask, how does a lake handle a storm? When you're faced with a difficult decision, instead of analyzing endlessly, ask, what does the clear reflection show me? Day by day, situation by situation, you'll begin to discover that you have access to a wisdom, a clarity, a power that doesn't depend on thinking your way through problems. You'll find that solutions arise naturally when your mind is still. You'll discover that right action becomes obvious when you're not clouded by mental turbulence. You'll experience that authentic confidence that comes not from building up your ego, but from connecting with your essential nature. But here's the deepest secret of the still lake, the one that took me decades to understand fully. The stillness you're seeking isn't something you need to create. It's something that's already there, has always been there, will always be there. Beneath every thought, every emotion, every disturbance, there exists a natural stillness that is your birthright, your original nature, your deepest truth. The waves on the surface of a lake are temporary, but the lake itself is permanent. The storms that cross the sky are passing, but the sky itself is eternal. The thoughts and emotions that move through your mind are fleeting, but the awareness in which they appear is constant, unchanging, always at peace. You are not trying to become still, you are learning to recognize the stillness you already are. You're not trying to achieve peace, you're removing the obstacles that hide the peace that is your natural state. You're not trying to find your true self. You're stopping the mental activities that obscure the self you've always been. Instead of fighting your thoughts and emotions, you begin to welcome them as temporary visitors in the vast space of your being. Instead of seeking validation from the external world, you begin to draw from the infinite well of stillness within. I remember the moment this understanding fully dawned on me. I was sitting by Victoria Harbour in Hong Kong, watching the water in the early morning light. The surface was completely still, reflecting the sky so perfectly that it was impossible to tell where water ended and heaven began. And suddenly I realized this is not a metaphor. This is literal truth. When the mind is perfectly still, the boundary between self and universe dissolves. You become the clear space in which all experience arises and passes away. From that day forward, I stopped practicing martial arts and started expressing martial arts. I stopped trying to be peaceful and started living from peace. I stopped seeking the still lake and started being the still lake. And everything I touched, every student I taught, every film I made, every challenge I faced was transformed by this understanding. This is what I'm offering you today. Not another technique to add to your collection, not another method to master, but a recognition of what you already are beneath all the mental noise and emotional turbulence. You are the still lake. You have always been the still lake. You cannot not be the still lake. The question isn't whether you can achieve this state. The question is whether you're willing to stop doing the things that disturb your natural stillness. Are you willing to let go of the need to control every outcome? Are you willing to release the compulsive thinking that promises security but delivers only anxiety? Are you willing to trust the wisdom that emerges from stillness rather than the confusion that comes from mental activity? As we reach the end of our journey together, I want you to understand that everything changes when you learn to live from the still lake. Your relationships become more authentic because you're not constantly disturbed by the need for approval. Your work becomes more effective because you're accessing deeper levels of creativity and intelligence. Your challenges become opportunities because you're responding from clarity rather than reactivity. But perhaps most importantly, you begin to experience the unshakable peace that is your birthright, not the temporary peace that depends on favorable circumstances, but the eternal peace that exists regardless of what's happening on the surface of your life. This is the peace that passes understanding, the stillness that surpasses knowledge, the calm that transcends all conditions. Right now, as you sit, wherever you are, close your eyes for a moment. Feel the stillness that exists between your thoughts. Notice the peace that's present beneath your emotions. Sense the vast awareness in which your entire experience is appearing. This is the still lake. This is your true nature. This is who you have always been. From this moment forward, you have a choice in every situation, every challenge, every interaction. You can respond from the turbulent surface of your mind, reactive and confused, or you can respond from the still depths, clear and wise, soft. You can identify with the waves of thought and emotion, or you can rest in the lake itself, peaceful and present. The still lake doesn't fight the storms. It simply remains itself until they pass. It doesn't try to control the reflections. It simply mirrors them clearly. Mirrors them clearly. It doesn't judge what appears on its surface. It simply receives it all with equal grace. Be like water, my friend. But be like still water. Be the lake that reflects heaven perfectly because it has learned to rest in its own depths. Be the mind that mirrors reality clear because it has stopped creating artificial turbulence. Be the awareness that remains peaceful regardless of what appears within it. This is not just philosophy. This is not just metaphor. This is the most practical wisdom you will ever receive. Because when you learn to live from the still lake of your mind, everything becomes possible. Every door opens. Every challenge becomes manageable. Every moment becomes sacred. The lake is waiting. It has always been waiting. Waiting. Stop throwing stones into your own water. Stop creating waves where there could be perfect stillness. Return to your depths. Remember your nature. Rest in the still lake of your being, and let everything else arise and pass away like clouds in an infinite sky. Your mind must be like a still lake, not because you make it so, but because you remember that it already is.